Welcome to the 18th of August council meeting. Welcome members, welcome staff and gallery. Mr Carroll, you're standing in today, so welcome to the meeting. Leave of absence, we do have one apology from Councillor Troop. Someone moved moved Councillor Hearn and seconded Councillor Johnston. All those in favour, that apology be accepted. Carried. Minutes from the previous meeting for confirmation. The council meeting held on the 21st of July, special meeting of council also on the 21st of July, and another special meeting on the 5th of August. Moved Councillor Hearn and seconded Councillor Barrett. All those in favour, those be carried. Thank you. No matters arising. We'll move to the Mayor's report on page 5. I've got nothing further to add unless there's any questions. Someone like to move? Deputy Mayor Boothby and seconded by Councillor De Vries. All those in favour? Carried. Consensus agenda. Is there any items that members wish to have excluded from the consensus agenda? Councillor De Vries?
Yeah, it's on page 20, the 4.2.1 regarding the change of part of the Barossa trail name.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett?
I've got on page 51, item 4.5.2.2, the Gawler River floodplain item.
Thank you. Any other items that members wish to have excluded? If not, can I have a mover and a seconder for those? Moved Councillor Miller and seconded Councillor Johnston. All those in favour of the consensus agenda other than those items? Carried. Councillor De Vries, the item that was withdrawn, correspondence seeking change of part of the Barossa trail name. On page 20.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I was reading Mr Hill-Smith's letter in regards to this. And I know we've been talking about off and on the idea that maybe different sections could have different subnames at some point in the future. I'm mindful of the cost of that. And I think maybe it should be a across the board sort of approach rather than piecemeal. But I've read his letter a number of times. Maybe somebody else has had a further conversation with him. Is he proposing some sort of like Grenache trail? Is that the name that he's? Because I didn't actually read that overtly in there, but maybe. Can anybody help?
Oh, look, I have spoken and sent an email back to Mr Hill-Smith in the earlier, and this is a subsequent letter that's come in since that. I did highlight to him, yes, we've had the name change. I also indicated to him that, you know, we also have within South Australia the Shiraz Trail and the Riesling Trail. I said I'm not certain if all of a sudden we then look at Grenache as to whether or not that's, you know, that's naming of using different varieties of wines is something that's already out there. And so subsequently he sent the letter in, but we did have that conversation regarding that. Councillor Johnston, you had your hand up? Yeah. So, you know, I pointed out to him that, you know, associated with the cost, but I said, look, if you want to write in, that's something that can be done. But as has been indicated, there would have to be a move from the chamber to put in a rescission motion to sort of deal with that. And that's been explained to him. Unless that happens, well, it won't go any further.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Look, no, I just, as I said, it seemed to infer that, but it wasn't specific enough that I wasn't sure exactly what the proposal was. So there is no formal proposal at this stage. It's just a general request for consideration. Okay, that's all I need to know. All right, I'll move the recommendation that the council receive and note the request.
Councillor Angus had his hand up just to speak on that. Councillor Angus.
Thank you, Mayor. If Councillor De Vries hadn't taken this out, I would have. I'm not really convinced that noting and receiving the request is totally appropriate. I think perhaps we should, maybe this warrants quarter of an hour in a workshop, at least to discuss it a bit further. If it has merit, let's follow it up. If it doesn't, let's let it go by the wayside. But it seems to me we're doing absolutely nothing at the double. So I would like to see the recommendation be that we consider this at a workshop in the not too distant future.
Are you prepared to move that?
Yes.
And seconded. Councillor Wee-Smith, yes.
I was actually going to speak to that as well. So likewise, Councillor Angus and Councillor De Vries, I was going to pull this out as well. I feel that this does warrant further discussion. At this time, I don't necessarily think it's a path that we should be going down. We've obviously spent a significant amount of money and time renaming the trail as it is, but as Councillor Angus has pointed out, I think it does warrant further discussion and investigation, and whether or not Mr Hill-Smith wants to come along to a workshop and be part of that.
I have a mover and a second. Does anyone else want to speak any further? So the motion is to put this onto an agenda workshop.
And receive it.
And receive it, yep. All those in favour? Carried. On page 51, the Gawler River Flood Management Authority minutes. Councillor Barrett.
Yes, the reason I've raised this and asked for it to be moved is people around this chamber, we have been privy to a workshop. We had Mr Tate come along and we had great discussion about it. And then I see the Mayor recently attended one of the meetings with the adoption of the management plan, and the Mayor voted against it. And I would just like it put on public record and out in the public domain the reason why the Mayor voted against it. I can't speak for the Adelaide Plains. We'll see they also voted against that particular management plan, just so the public have got some idea why as a council we have voted against that particular management plan.
Thanks, Councillor Barrett, for your question. I guess going back historically, we was always party to, reluctantly I might add, being drawn into the Gawler River Flood Management Authority. And in those days it was about modifications to the South Para spillway, as well as the Bruce Eastic Dam. Now, a lot of things, a lot of water's gone down the river, well, not so much water, but a lot of water under the bridge somewhere. And I just believe it's time to hit the reset button. Things have grown and it has expanded beyond just those two items I mentioned, to the point now where we're dealing with flood mitigation in the lower reaches. And ongoing maintenance of levee banks and all of those things associated with what is being proposed. Where we're up to is that the decision of that meeting was to go out and get some costings associated with developing a flood management plan. And I believe, even as a representative of, and taking into account that part of our role on the Gawler River Flood Management is for the we've got to be conscious of the benefits we're bringing to the whole of the catchment, not so much, as was pointed out to me at the meeting, putting my council's views across. But I still believe that we've now progressed a long way away from the original charter, and that's where we're talking about, is going back and looking at the charter and looking at the relevance of where we're going and the ongoing operating costs. One is to go ahead and do the flood stormwater management plan, which was never ever discussed in any stage, but now we're being told that we have to do that. So there's associated costs, associated risks and ongoing consequences. So the idea of sort of pulling that out and sort of asking for the division was to say, let's look at the charter again before we commit any councils to any further expenditure at this point in time. Councillor Johnston went to the last meeting, and which I was unable to attend, and I'm led to believe that they're going ahead and getting the costings. Then we'll get a formal letter coming to this council, and then we can thrash out what our position's going to be. And it may well mean that we've got to sort of revisit where we sit in this whole thing as a result of it expanding to a far greater scope than what was ever first envisaged. So, but I might let Councillor Johnston just give a little quick update, but bear in mind there'll be further discussions on this and a position from council coming in the not too distant future.
So, yes, sorry. The risk of going over old ground, the idea is that all except 1 in 100 year flood events are managed across the catchment. The Barossa structure and the modifications to the South Para spillway were meant to achieve that. But it was discovered sometime later that the modelling was not adequate and that it's really only 1 in 40 year flood event. So downstream of the Barossa east structure and the confluence of the South and North Paras are now subject to flooding perhaps once every 40 years at least. So we're now reaching into people's backyards and modifying the floodplain out beyond the Barossa structure and downstream towards the ocean. And so we're being drawn as a council into potentially having to spend large amounts of money maintaining works below the confluence of the two rivers. Adelaide Plains have summed it up best. After the 2016 flood events, federal and state governments agreed that they would provide 50-50 funding for that work. And we're now in a position where we need to understand the extent of that work, and the costs of that are ballooning because they're now insisting that we develop a quite comprehensive stormwater management plan and 30% of the design costs. So our council is quietly being drawn into more and more of the recurrent expenditure around this exercise, because if we do in fact get the state and federal governments to support this thing 50-50, the idea is that the 6 councils in the authority would support the operating costs. So I think Adelaide Plains summed it up by saying, unless we can get clarity on where the funding is coming from, and we understand more fully what the best arrangements are around the charter for the authority, we're now sailing in a situation where this council is possibly going to be asked to spend large amounts of money outside of its council area, which you might call is possibly against the Act. That's yet to unfold. But I'm sorry, I'll probably rabbited on too long, but it's kind of where we are. We need to think carefully about the governance arrangements before we get drawn into this long-term recurrent expenditure potentially. Thank you. Councillor De Vries.
That's where we are. Let me tell you where we were. We were dragged into this kicking and screaming as a council. We did not want to do it, and we actually did it under advice from our lawyers that said that if we didn't do it, we may find ourselves liable for any of the damage that would happen downstream. I believe we were coerced into it. I'm sure Councillor Angus is nodding. It was a very sore point for this council, and nobody was happy about it. We shouldn't, in my view, have been in there in the first place. I think we basically took a slightly coward's way out, but there you have it. I believe, but what we were assured at the time, and we were told this repeatedly, that if we paid for that dam or our share of the dam, that would be it. That would be absolutely the last time we would have to put our hands in our pockets to pay for any downstream mitigation. The fact that they are now trying to change that, I think, renders the whole exercise null and void. So from my view, I reckon the sooner we get out of this organisation, the better, unless they can demonstrate that we are getting some benefit from it. I've repeatedly said this, it seems to be that when it's bad water, it's ours, and when it's good water, it's theirs. If this included some level of water harvesting where we could actually get some value for our effort, I'd maybe be inclined to stay in it. But at the moment, I think this is just cost shifting. I don't believe it's our responsibility to deal with what's going on down there. That business about the 1 in 100 dam turning into a 1 in 40 is a very sore point, because we were assured that that was absolutely what we needed to do. We were given poor advice at the time on all accounts, and I think this council was sold a pup. So no, I don't believe we should be part of this, and the fact that they're pulling this stuff now, it's just, you can tell I'm pretty annoyed about this. And this has been dragging on for how long, Your Worship? 20 years, something. Yeah, yeah. And really, I think we've been conned by this.
CEO, and then Councillor Hearn wants to speak.
Just in the concept of full disclosure, Councillor Barrett, obviously the Mayor and I spoke in between the council meetings around this particular issue. In fact, I think it's really simpler than this. There's $80 million being proposed. We actually are 1/6 underwriting that. We have the fiduciary and responsibility to our ratepayers. We have to make sure that there's actually some form of benefit in that. And I don't think, at the moment we're having a general conversation, we will bring back the whole information and have a full detailed workshop on it. The other thing that needs to be considered is that we can't withdraw in our own right, so we have some hurdles to get over, whatever the discussion ends up being. So in the concept of financial and fiduciary responsibilities, my advice was the process we understood actually hasn't been followed either. You know, there was meant to be a conclusion of the governance arrangements, which were then meant to come back to council. It seems we've jumped 3 steps ahead. That was my advice to the Mayor. The other clarification I make is that when the Mayor's actually sitting on there, he's actually sitting as a member of the GRFMA. He's not making a decision on the behalf of the council.
Councillor Hearn?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'd like to endorse the remarks that Councillor De Vries made. You made comments, I guess, at that particular workshop, which echoes the thoughts that Martin has been, CEO has been talking about. I believe also there was a plan in vogue at one stage about water harvesting from this end of the valley, with some, and Councillor De Vries nodding his head, and I don't think that came to fruition at all. So I think there's lots of things about this that are pretty open-ended, and I would hate to see that we are committed to perhaps millions of dollars from this council when we've got so much on our plates at the moment. So if we could perhaps come back to another workshop, whether we need a motion on that to discuss that or what whatever the time frame is, but I'd be very careful about committing funds to this authority at this point in time.
Yeah, as I indicated earlier, there will be a formal letter about the stormwater management plan costs and then how that's going to be funded. So as the CEO has indicated, we need to have those ongoing discussions and look at where our position is. But I'm quite adamant, even for the benefit of the Gawler River Flood Management Board, there should be a reset button as to what the ongoing commitments are. Bearing in mind, this is only the lower reaches. Gawler is still not protected, so if we start expanding all that into the equation, then there's ongoing cost to fix Gawler's problems, and we still haven't finished our work in Tanunda yet either. So that'll come back. Councillor Barrett, would you like to move that consensus agenda be accepted?
Yes, I would.
Someone second. Councillor Wee Smith. All those in favour? That carried. Members will now move to the debate agenda. On page 77, this is the quarterly update of the delegations register, 7.2.1.1 on page 77.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Moved Councillor De Vries and seconded Councillor Hearn. Do you wish to speak to the motion at all?
No.
Councillor Hearn? Any questions? All those in favour? Carried. Page 109, 7.2.2.1, the monthly finance report as of the 31st of July 2020. Page 109, recommendation there.
I'll move the recommendation.
Councillor Johnston moved and seconded Councillor Hayvick. Either wish to speak to the motion at all? Any questions? All those in favour? Carried. Page 112, 7.2.2.2, the 2020-21 cash advance on page 112.
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Moved Councillor De Vries, seconded Councillor Johnston. Do you wish to speak, Councillor De Vries?
Yeah, I will, just very briefly. Just to let the gallery and people listening in on the internet know that basically what this is offering us is the local government, LGA is offering us an ability to borrow at an interest rate of 0.75 lower than the standard rate at the moment, which basically means we'd be looking at, I think it's from memory, 1.45% borrowing, which I just checked the current rate of inflation, and that's running at 1.43. So it's almost free money. So I think we'd be crazy not to do this.
As a second, Mr. Councillor Johnston, you wish to speak?
No.
Okay. CEO?
Just clarifying, we're not actually really taking out more, we're substituting as well.
Yeah. Any questions? Not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Page 116. This is the revised disability access and inclusion plan. Page 116, 7.3.2.1. CEO?
Just to note, this report would normally sit under Manager, Community and Corporate, so we'll just make a note that it should have sat underneath that particular part of the agenda. The new agenda management system will help resolve that.
Moved Councillor Johnston and seconded Councillor De Vries. You wish to speak?
Only to reinforce the view that it doesn't substantially change from the previous plan, and that I'd like to congratulate the staff involved in putting this together and the approach that the council is taking to disability access. Thank you.
Councillor De Vries, you wish to speak?
No, that's fine.
Question, Councillor Schilling.
I just wanted to know a bit more about this committee. Sorry. Oh, here we go. I was just had a quick question on this committee and who's involved in it and how often do they meet, please?
Ms. Thomas.
Through you, Mayor, so they meet normally on a bi-monthly basis. That's changed a little with COVID. We've just started meeting again, I think this month, after a bit of a break. So it's pulled from a whole range of different community and interest groups. It's administered by Deb Anderson, who's our collaborative project officer, but this is actually part of her role under the social inclusion work that we did, which is the follow-on work after we exited from the leisure options work. So this is now our more advocacy role around social inclusion. So it's not a council committee in terms of its representation. It's made up of, as I say, a whole range of different stakeholders, including people with disabilities, people working within the sector, and chaired by an independent community member. And I think the committee will be revisiting its membership again shortly, according to the last conversation I had with Miss Anderson. So that answers your question.
Any further questions? Not, I'll put the motion as written. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Next item is on page 164, the dog parks project summary. This is to provide a summary of the project cost to date and inform council of the request for additional facilities. Councillor Louise Smith.
Just a question. So I just want to note before we move forward with this motion that we have come in under the initial $100,000 funding that we received, which I think is fantastic. I note that we did set aside certain funds for each project, noting that there were going to be differences in what needed to be put in place, more fencing, etc., etc. I think at this point, though, when there's a balance of funding, we need to consider both parks equally now in terms of any other improvements that the respective groups would like made to these groups. So my question is, have any conversations been had with Williamstown Action Group regarding the park and anything that they might like to see happen there?
Ms Thomas?
Through you, Mayor. I'd have to take that on notice. Ms Tappett's unwell today. I don't know if she's had those conversations. My understanding is that that we've just kept that group involved in terms of what's happening, but I don't think we've talked to them around future activities. My understanding was also that the broader group was also able to have conversations around both parks, but as I say, I have to take that one on notice and confirm.
My understanding has been very much that the Friends of group is very Nuriulpa focused, and that's my concern here. I think the plan that they've put forward is fantastic, and it's really good to see this initiative. You know, they want to improve this park and make it as, you know, attractive as they can for dogs and their families. But I think it would be really remiss of us as a council not to ensure that Williamstown is getting that same opportunity before we just decide to sort of allocate a significant amount of funds to one group. So if we could amend that recommendation there to include discussions with Williamstown, I'd be happy to move that.
So that would be a hand over to CEO.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So you're just saying with number 3, the Friends of the Barossa Dog Parks and Williamstown Action Group? Yes. Fine. And then we'll bring back on proposal. Yep, no worries. All good.
Councillor Hayvick?
Just one question in relation to the Nuriulpa Dog Park. Has there been any consideration in having retrickulated water put through there in the summer to keep it green? Because I remember last year when it first opened, the biggest complaint with it was full of seeds and prickles. So it's no good having a dog park there in the middle of summer. It's going to be a dry situation. I believe there would have been water there anyway because that area was irrigated previously. So I don't think it'd be a big job to do that job.
Yes, CEO.
So when we ask both groups and bring that back, they'll answer that question.
Councillor Lee-Smith.
Just a further question to that one. So the initial budget, from my understanding, did include some funds to address the burr issue at Nuriulpa. So perhaps that's something we need further discussion around first as well to ensure that that's been addressed.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is additional maintenance funding in terms of dealing with it. There's no recollection of any reticulation. The project was actually made on the basis that we would create the park. Any additional expenditure from that would come from community benefits and community other opportunities, etc., etc. But the great thing is we've got some money left over and we'll bring back a program.
I haven't got a mover or a second yet. Moved by Councillor Wee-Smith and seconded by Councillor Hayvick. Any further questions? Do you wish to speak to the motion? Thank you.
Of course I wish to speak to this motion. As everybody knows, this has been my pet project, no pun intended. It's been a long road since this campaign started in 2015-16, and I think it's really important. I noted that this report misses where the funding's come from. This project wouldn't have happened without the support of the member for Schubert, and also without the really strong support of Kelly Adams and Debbie Baum from Nuriulpa and Williamstown respectively, who have worked really hard on behalf of their communities to get this project up and running. So yeah, as I said, really passionate about this project, so glad to finally see something in place, but I think it's important we acknowledge those 3 people who have put so much into this project.
Councillor Hayvick, you wish to speak to the motion at all? No. Any further questions? Well, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Next item on the agenda is 169. This is to do with a request for stormwater drainage works, Barossa Valley Way, Lindock. The arrangement for an easement of land, easement over a portion of land, I should say. 169.
Yeah, I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor Hearn and seconded by Councillor Haybick. You wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Hearn?
Only to say it's good that we can cooperate with constituents in the council area.
Councillor Haybick, you got...
Yeah, just further to that, I know about watercourses, and the watercourse is on private land, but I think the council over the years has been somewhat responsible for the drainage problem that exists there now, so I think we have to bear the brunt there.
CEO.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Hearn. I would argue that our staff and organisation deals with most inquiries with our members and community extremely well. Yes, we get the odd one right, but yeah, I think the inference is interesting.
Yeah, absolutely correct. I think this is something that well done to the staff to come up with these negotiations, and I remember it well. No further questions. If not, put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Item 7.5.1.1 on page 176. This is the Planning Development Infrastructure Act.
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Move Councillor De Vries. Seconded Councillor Johnston. Do you wish to speak to the item, Councillor De Vries?
Yes, I do, Your Worship. Thanks. I think the recommendation is fine as it is, which is why I'm happy to move it. But I think there are some things we need to consider going forward. One of the concerns that I have, I mean, there's been a number of issues that have been pointed out in the report, which I think are useful. One of the issues, of course, is that as fees increase, if the state government decides to increase their fees, we will be seen as being the ones increasing it, even if it's actually done by them, and that's just going to be a reality of it. I am also concerned about the fact that rather than putting notices into the newspaper for non-complying, that's now going to be like a on-location notice. I'm not sure. I can see how that might work better in the cities and the country, where less people have to be driving past a residence that maybe, or an area they might not actually be aware of it. So I'm not sure that that's actually going to give the wider community the best indication. But anyway, it is what it is. What I'm concerned about is that there is a suggestion here that if you have, for example, that we will have a travel installation cost, which will vary depending on how far you are away from the principal office, being here in Nuriupta. This feels very unfair to me that somebody in Angaston would pay one price and somebody in Williamstown would pay more. And they're actually being double disadvantaged, because not only are they now not able to lodge and deal with the planners in their town, because of course it has to be centralised somewhere, so it's here in Nuriupta, but I don't think they should be then further penalised by the fact that they then have to pay an additional fee for the fact that they happen to be living further away from Nuriupta and further away from the principal office than another member of the Barossa. We are one Barossa after all, and I think that for my mind that should be then a one size fits all. And if that means that the people of Angaston are slightly subsidising the people of Williamstown, no disrespect to them, John, but I think that John would agree with me that that is reasonable and fair. I don't like the idea that some Barossans are paying more and some Barossans are paying less for essentially the same service, simply because they happen to be further away from the council office, which I actually think should be seen as a disadvantage, and they shouldn't be penalised as a result. That being said, I think that can all be accommodated within the recommendation, and I gather that's coming back anyway, so I'm happy to move.
Just a question of the relevant officer. Are we likely as a council to opt to join this scheme?
If I may respond through the chair, the manager of planning services is in the chamber at the moment, so perhaps he could answer those questions. Thanks, Will.
Thank you. Through the mayor, there's no particular option to avoid the due process that's been outlined in that report. There is the option, however, that applicants can create their own signage and erect it on their own site and don't need to go to the council. It's only if an applicant requests that the council undertake the development and erection of the signage that the council does it. In addition, the cost and fee structure that's been created there is based on a model that's been discussed at the LGA with other councils, but we take the point in relation to the apparent prejudice that may occur if someone's further away from the office.
Councillor Johnson.
Just a point of clarification, I'm looking at page 185.
That's the next report.
Sorry? On the wrong report, I apologise.
Councillor Barrett.
I'm intrigued now.
I thank Councillor Vries for the sentiments he just spoke about. He's raised some of the issues I wanted to raise, but I've got a question. And when I read through on page 180, we talked about refined methodology, and then I sort of read further into the guidelines behind this, and I see the next phase, they hope to have it up and running by the end of December, so really running about 3 or 4 months. This particular impost on outlying communities will be there. Is there any indication what some of this refined methodology may well be?
I really wish I could answer that. Because the concepts we're dealing with are so new, I think that the state government, as well as the LGA, as well as the councils, are still feeling their way on what will actually happen. For example, it may be recognised that there is a bit of a prejudice in terms of distance from the main office, and there may be, I guess, an average fee created for putting up these signs, or it may be that applicants will absorb the cost of doing these signs themselves, and it's really not an issue for the council. We really need to, I guess, wait and see, and see how much demand or otherwise there is for the council to actually do this type of work. Thank you.
Councillor Havik.
Just by way of comment, I read in today's advertiser that the new system will not be coming in this year. It'll be next year now. This is from the Attorney General.
Yeah, there may be some further. There's a webinar with the mayors tomorrow evening, so some of this further detail might be coming forward with the Premier and the LGA tomorrow night from the webinar. But Councillor Havik's right, and the CEO pointed that out to me this morning also, that it may be a further delay in the process. Any further questions? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Next item is on page 184. This is to do with the draft local design review scheme of the South Australian Analysis and Key Submission Response on 7.5.1.2.
Questions? Mover, seconder?
I'll move it.
Councillor De Vries and seconded Councillor Schilling. You wish to speak to the motion, Councillor De Vries?
No, I'm fine. Excuse me.
Any other questions? I left my piece of paper home with my questions on this one. It was something to do with what's happening in Metro Adelaide. From memory, there was something in this report that talked about that. Is there any examples what that means?
Again, if I may respond through the chair, the author of the report is in the chamber at the moment, Mr. Micken. Perhaps he could respond to those questions.
Thank you. Mr. Micken.
Thank you. Since writing the report, I have found out that I've made reference in the report to the state review design scheme through the Office for Design and Architecture. I've since found out that that is subject to a statutory referral process similar to the CFS and Commissioner of Highways. So a proponent who is nominated under the regulations, for example, a development of $3 million or more, can go through state design review, but it's through that formal referral process, whereas this scheme would be a voluntary arrangement if councils participated. So two different systems.
Is it adding further red tape to the process?
Could I just say that I stressed in the report that commenting on this paper at this stage is not committing council to participate in the scheme. That'll be a future decision. It also does not preclude council to continue or develop its own informal design review process. For example, it could be an expansion of the existing local heritage advisory service. So yeah, just stress that this does not commit council to participating now or in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Micken. Any further questions? Put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. On page 225, 7.5.4.1, this is the mobile food vendor policy and location rules. Remember, this went out for public consultation, now comes back for council's consideration. 225, moved by Councillor Hearn, seconded by Councillor Haybick. Will you wish to speak to it, Councillor Hearn?
No, I think it's all self-explanatory, Mayor.
Councillor Haybick?
I need to say there's been a lot of work done on this subject, and I thank those who have been involved, and I think it's a well thought out policy.
Any questions? All those in favour of the recommendation? Carried. Page 245, this is the draft enforcement policy. Councillor Haybick moved. Seconded Councillor De Vries. You wish to speak to it, Councillor Haybick?
I need to say that I think that follows on from the previous matter, and I think that's well done as well.
Councillor De Vries, you wish to speak?
I await the community's response with bated breath.
Okay. No further question. All those in favour? Carried. Members, that comes to the end of our agenda for the meeting today. Our next scheduled meeting is on the 15th of September 2020. Thank you for your attendance. I declare the meeting closed.